Hey everyone, Nubkeks here, and in today's video, let's take our first look at some of the class-specific, covenant-specific legendary powers which are coming in patch 9.1. We're actually going to look at Priest here first today, because obviously this is what I've played all of these specs in Mythic raiding in Castle Nathria, so I can give you hopefully a fairly good idea of what's going on here. And also, Priest did actually receive some reworks to 2 of these covenant-specific legendaries, literally just today or last night. Can't remember which, but let's dive in and let's take a look. So the first one we're going to look at is Bwonsamdi's Pact, and this is for the Night Fae in particular. I'm actually Night Fae right now, so I can sort of show you this stuff. I'll obviously bring up all the other abilities as well that tie into these legendaries, so you can see those effects too. But Bwonsamdi's Pact: enter a pact with the Death Loa, calling forth a haunted mask that lingers on a target until Fae Guardians ends. And then the haunted mask, what does it do? It copies the benefit of the current fairy on its target, and this follows your direct mask. So first of all, I mean, just so you guys know, Fae Guardians is one of the more complicated Covenant abilities, I suppose. It's a 1.5 minute cooldown. You summon up these 3 Fae Guardians for 20 seconds. So obviously this Bwonsamdi's Pact is going to be an additional guardian, as it were, that goes alongside that, the Haunted Mask. The Wrathful Fairy follows your Shadow Word Pain, so that goes on a hostile target, and that gives you back a bit of mana or some insanity whenever you do a direct attack against a target. The Guardian Fairy follows Power Word Shield, and that is going to give 20% damage reduction. And your Benevolent Fairy follows your Shadow Mend or your Flash Heal, and that gives double cooldown reduction rate on a major cooldown. So that gives cooldown reduction on Void Eruption, Void Form for Shadow Priest, Divine Hymn for Holy Priest, and so on. And obviously you can put it on other specs as well. You can put it on anyone you want. So, you know, Fire Mages with Combustion would be a really good example for how you could use that. So what is interesting here, what's interesting here is how is this direct mask going to work? Now, I think that it's quite likely that this is going to be, you can reactivate the Fae Guardians button, because if you'll notice with the Fae Guardians button, it travels with Shadow Word Pain, Power Word Shield, and Shadow Mend, right? So the actual button here for Fae Guardians, this just goes on cooldown, doesn't do anything. So I very much suspect that this legendary will make this an active button, where you can just redirect one of these fairies to different things. I don't think I can do it to a guard. I doubt it works. No, it's not quite going to work. Do I have a friendly player? No, he's Horde. Unfortunate. Okay. Well, I can't show you, but anyway, if I cast a friendly spell on someone, the Guardian would jump across to them. So I suspect you'll be able to target players with that direct mask, and also enemies, and duplicate the effect. So you could duplicate a Wrathful Fairy and get twice as much insanity or twice as much mana back from attacking the target. Seems not very useful, to be honest. You could also, I think, you can have the Benevolent Fairy and the Guardian Fairy on the same person. And in that circumstance, I would suspect that if you put the Haunted Mask on that person as well, it would probably duplicate both. So instead of 20% damage reduction, it would give them 40% damage reduction for 20 seconds. That's pretty good. That's pretty damn good. If you think of that, that's even very useful on a tank, for example. That's a huge amount of mitigation for quite a long time. On a 1.5 minute cooldown, 20 seconds defensive, not bad as an external. And then Benevolent Fairy, you could essentially give them, instead of 100% additional cooldown reduction speed, 200% additional cooldown reduction speed, combustions for days. Combustions for days. So this one is, it's an interesting legendary. I think you can agree. This is an interesting legendary. Will it be good? I think it's quite a cheesy one, that's for sure. I think it's quite cheesy. Certainly for, it could have some uses perhaps for PvP as the defensive benefit of that Guardian Fairy and the Benevolent Fairy. I think that could be pretty nifty. I certainly think for healers in particular, so for the Holy Priest and the Disc Priest, it's actually not too bad. That isn't too bad as an extra external CD. That could have some use as alternatively, again, slapping it on your resident fire mage or whatever. That could be okay. I think for Shadow Priest, it's quite a question mark. Instead of getting 20 seconds off Void Eruption, you get 40 off of it, which is quite a lot. It brings it from a 90-second cooldown to a 50-second cooldown, which is kind of insane. That's kind of nutty. So we'll have to see. This was just reworked today. Obviously, it's competing against very good legendaries. So we'll see. I certainly think that it could be potentially quite fun to play around with. It could also be quite irritating to play around with. It really depends, you know. I mean, just getting way more Void Eruptions is fun. But yeah, having to really min-max and figure out like, oh, what spec to use it on, that could be annoying. But let me know what you think, guys. I think that it actually is kind of intriguing, and I kind of like what they've done with it, to be honest. We'll see. The next one that got reworked was Shadow Word Manipulation. This is your Venthyr legendary power here. Mind Games will last an additional 3 seconds, reverses an additional 10% damage or healing. Interesting that it's not both, it's one or the other, which is kind of weird. When Mind Games can no longer reverse healing or damage, gain 3% critical strike for each second remaining for 10 seconds. So this is quite funky. If I show you the, if I get the Mind Games tooltip up here, so you guys can see that. Let's grab this here. Yeah, you guys can see it. I'm in the way. So this is Mind Games. Obviously, I can't show it to you right now, but it's a 45-second cooldown, 1.5-second cast. You do a big chunk of shadow damage, and then you debuff the target for 5 seconds, which reverses the next chunk of damage they do, and also reverses the next chunk of healing they do. And then you get a bunch of insanity or a bunch of mana back for each of those effects. So you'd get up to whatever. I think you get 10 insanity from the damage and 10 from the healing. Something like that. And 2% mana from the damage, 2% from reversing healing. The challenge with this for sure is that it's quite difficult to get the benefits of both. But what is interesting is it's very, very easy to reverse damage in PvE. So that's where this becomes interesting, right? So Mind Games would be, instead of a 5-second debuff, it becomes an 8-second debuff. It reverses an extra bit of stuff, so that's okay. And yeah, if you imagine against a raid boss, right? Raid boss smacking your tanks or just doing raid-wide damage, when you put this debuff on them, that's going to reflect or reverse an next chunk of damage they do. Basically, they're going to reverse that in basically a single hit. That's not going to take long at all. It's going to go off almost immediately, which means that let's say that it takes 1 second. So you've got 7 seconds remaining from the 8-second debuff. 7 seconds times 3% critical chance, you're going to get about 21% crit chance for 10 seconds. It will just pop like that. This becomes, I think, pretty interesting for Discipline Priest. Quite interesting for Disc Priest, if I show that to you. I think for Shadow, it's not bad either. I just flipped off Shadow, but Shadow have a talent that does make their Void form last longer for every Void Bolt crit. So it's sort of interesting with that. You know, a nice sort of 10-second buff every 45 seconds. It's okay. It's not super exciting. It's mostly passive, but it's okay. I think Discipline is where it gets interesting. You know, for Holy, there's no real major synergy there. But for Discipline with Spirit Shell, that's a pretty big deal, right? So you go into your Spirit Shell. The first thing you do, so you basically put Atonement on everyone. You press Spirit Shell, right? And then then you go into this. You go into a Mind Games. And it's going to give you that extra 20% crit for 10 seconds, which does sync up pretty well with Spirit Shell, and that goes on. The issue, I think, with this, do I have the Legendary on right now? No, the Shadow Flame Prism. Here we go. Clarity of Mind. See, this is the question mark. Let me switch to Spirit Shell so you can actually see it. The issue is that it competes with this, which is Clarity of Mind, where Spirit Shell increases the duration of active atonements by 3 seconds and also gives you some mana cost reduction. Now, the bigger deal here is that increases the atonement duration by 3 seconds, which does let you therefore get value out. Because by the time you sort of blanket everyone in atonement, the first ones that you've put on have actually started falling off. So if you don't take this Clarity of Mind legendary, then yeah, you're not going to get as even a spread of Spirit Shell across your group. So that's sort of the thing that it's competing with, which is quite interesting. The other option is, as you can see, on 9.1, Spirit Shell and Evangelism actually share the exact same CD. And with Evangelism, this does by itself, all this does is extend all of your atonements by 6 seconds. That's all it does. So with that one, that could actually be pretty good. You know, you spread out your all of your effects, you pop Evangelism, and then you slap them with this new legendary with the Mind Games. The Mind Games itself does a massive chunk of healing, which obviously heals through that atonement that you've put on everyone. And then you're going to have a whole bunch of crit chance going through that. So that could be potentially a good synergy. Though, of course, you are giving up these other legendaries. So it's really how it works in comparison with them. But I think this one does have some potential. Certainly for PvP, it might be okay. The longer debuff in PvP is a bit more relevant. as being more of a hassle on an enemy healer or DPS. And obviously, you know, I guess it has some kill pressure there, some potential. I would say that only like 20% extra crit chance, which is sort of best case scenario, is maybe a little bit unreliable, a little bit low. But we'll see. I think this certainly looks to me to be probably best for Disc Priest, I would think, with Evangelism specifically. I don't think it's going to be as good with Spirit Shell as Clarity of Mind. And yeah, we'll see. There you go. Next up, we have the Kirian power, Sphere's Harmony. Boon of the Ascendant's cooldown is reduced by 2 seconds up to 60 seconds for each stack of Boon of the Ascended consumed by Ascended Eruption. So again, this is a somewhat complicated ability. Let me get Boon of the Ascended up here and we can look at the tooltip. Here we go. So this is a 3-minute cooldown. It's a whopper of a cooldown. 1.5 second cast. You become Ascended for 10 seconds, and then you can do the Ascended Nova and the Ascended Blast. Oh, do we actually not see the powers here? Exactly. So Ascended Blast gives you 5 stacks. Now, this is where it becomes interesting because Ascended Nova grants 1 stack of Boon of the Ascended for every single target that you damage. It's an AoE spell that you can spam. So essentially you do like Ascended Blast, then 2 Ascended Nova, Ascended Blast, 2 Ascended Nova. So there's a guaranteed number of stacks from Ascended Blast, but Ascended Nova really scales up in how many stacks you're going to get based off of how many enemies that you're hitting. So that is where this becomes interesting, because this is based off of how many stacks you've generated, and that's going to give you a certain amount of cooldown reduction up to 60 seconds. You're going to have to hit quite a few targets, I think, to make this worthwhile. Let's assume, so you're probably going to get what? You might get 4 of these, cast 3 or 4 of these off, so you're looking at, you know, 15 to 20 stacks guaranteed from Ascended Blast. That's not bad. That's not bad. 15 to 20 stacks. So you're looking at maybe 30 to 40 seconds. Let's say 30 seconds of cooldown reduction kind of guaranteed if you're using Ascended Blast consistently. It might be okay. I think this is certainly leaning a bit more towards... I'd say this is definitely leaning a bit more towards some Mythic Plus stuff, I would think, if you want to play Kirian Priest there, because to be able to get more consistent cooldown reduction, use it to really do a good bit of really strong AoE damage, and also strong AoE healing on big pulls in Mythic Plus, and bring it down more consistently to a 2-minute cooldown instead of 3. If you could tie that into frequent 2-minute pulls, that could be good. I feel like this one is quite tricky to work around, to be honest with you. I feel like that's quite tricky to work around. And you are going to be giving up other fairly significant things. So, again, you'd be giving up something like Shadowflame Prism for Shadow Priest, which is a huge amount of cleave damage. So, I don't know if that would be super worth it. Whereas this is extremely reliable. Yeah, I'm not sure about that. Could be good for Holy Priest, but again, you'd be giving up Flash Concentration, which is really ups your single target priority healing throughput with your heal, which is, again, extremely good. So that's a bit of a question mark, I think. For Discipline Priest, again, like maybe for Discipline Priest, it could be okay for some dungeon stuff. Maybe. But yeah, I'm not super sure. You'd be kind of gimping yourself a bit in Raid by not having access to mind games, most likely. This does not sync up with Evangelism or Spirit Shell pretty much at all. I mean, it already sort of naturally syncs up with every second Evangelism or Spirit Shell being a 3-minute cooldown and then being 1.5-minute cooldowns. Bringing it down to a 2-minute cooldown does not sync up with those. So this one is a bit weird. Yeah, I think it's a neat idea. We'll see how useful it actually ends up being. Maybe for some dungeons if you are running Kirian Priest. Now, the interesting thing is that the final legendary for Priest has not actually been implemented yet. So this is obviously very, very much placeholder. But this is called Pallid Command. Casting Unholy Nova summons a Maldraxi champion to aid you for a certain amount of seconds. Each time he is healed by Unholy Transfusion... each time an ally is healed by Unholy Transfusion, his healing and damage done is increased by 1% up to a maximum of X%. So this one is a bit weird. Obviously, we don't know how long it summons the guy for. Unholy Nova is 1-minute cooldown. It's kind of this skill shot thing, shoots out on a target, and then it does an AoE in 15 yards, which does damage, it puts a dot on targets, and then it also does an AoE heal as well. So what puts me off about this Pallid Command thing, and why I suspect they haven't implemented it yet, it does seem a bit tricky. Number one, it's based off of allies healed. Allies healed by Unholy Transfusion is going to empower this guy. That obviously I think works pretty well If you're a Holy Priest or a Disc Priest, it could, well, not even that well. It works okay if you're those and you're using it as a purely healing sort of thing. But if you're sort of focused on using this as a damage tool, like as a Shadow Priest, this becomes quite clunky. So I don't actually really like this all that much. Other than that, it's a fairly standard, summon in the champion, and he does a certain amount of damage. We'll see. I'm not sure. We'll see exactly how it works. Like, does healing through atonement with the transfusion, does that work? Does that build up stacks? That sort of thing. Because, of course, this Unholy Transfusion, allies who damage the targets with Unholy Transfusion are healed. So perhaps it could actually build up a lot of stacks just from beating on people and triggering that Unholy Transfusion healing, those little ticks of healing, which are quite small. Maybe that actually will be significant. I'm not sure. Either way, I don't think there's really all that much gameplay to it either way. I mean, you just press the Unholy Nova button still every 1 minute probably, and then whatever, the champion just goes and does his thing, and you don't really interact with it. So we'll see. But there you go, guys. That was a quick look at what the Priest Legendaries are looking like so far. I think the Necrolord one is really just a matter of tuning. The Pallid command, whatever, summon in your champion. He's stronger based off of the healing that you do. Not really much gameplay there, so we'll see if that actually gets changed. I think there's a medium chance that it does get changed. Sphere's Harmony then would be the next least interesting one to me, which just gives you some cooldown reduction on Boon of the Ascended based off how many stacks you have. So whatever, it's probably about 30 seconds in single target. Could go up to 60 seconds once you're in AoE. It's okay, but I'm just not really super seeing how you would play around it. This could be super fun whenever they let us use 2 legendaries. That could be quite cool, but for right now, I'm not really sold on it, to be honest. My next favorite would be Bwonsamdi's Pact. I think it has some interesting effects, but it's always the fear, right? Because it is such a utility effect. It's always that fear that it could be too strong as a cheese type mechanic, or it could be unfun. It could be very fun, could be unfun. We'll see. But essentially, this is the Haunted Mask. It duplicates the effects of your guardian, your Fey Guardians, on whichever target you put the Haunted Mask on. So very interesting. You could give 20 seconds of 40% damage reduction to a player. I think that's very cool. That's very cool. That is powerful. You give 200% cooldown reduction on a major CD for 20 seconds. So again, fire mages around the world are eyeing that up with beady eyes, destruction warlocks, all that sort of stuff. Could be kind of fun if that is how it works for you as a Shadow Priest. Get a 50-second cooldown Void Form, spending more time, going back to BFA, spending like 70% plus of the fight easily in Void Form at that point. We'll see how that goes. Again, potential for cheese, potential for it to be quite cool. I think it's interesting. I kind of like it. And then there's Shadow Manipulation. I probably actually would put, on second thought, I do think that the Night Fae one is probably my favorite, the most interesting. Shadow Word Manipulation does seem to have some uses for PvP, really emphasizing the mind games, the debuff effect, and having the enemy team need to play around that. That's kind of interesting. I think it's certainly interesting for Evangelism Disc Priest to give you some extra throughput when you're already getting that atonement increase. And of course, Clarity of Mind, it doesn't work with Evangelism. It works with Spirit Shell, which replaces Rapture. So with an Evangelism build, yeah, I think you could totally run with something like this and really emphasize those evangelisms. That could be quite cool. Effectively, probably getting around 20% crit chance for 10 seconds, pretty much as soon as you press Mind Games. It's okay. It's okay. It's not necessarily amazing. It doesn't really change your gameplay at all, I don't think, but it could be a decent throughput effect. We'll see. But there you go, guys. Let me know what you think, and let me know what classes you'd like to see next as well, because I'm really quite open in terms of which ones to do. I think it'd be quite fun, though, to check out these legendaries. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.